on, Center City Church?
You already know.
Well, look who is back.
Yeah. Had a
Back at
great
it
trip.
again.
Glad to be back.
Well, we're glad to have you back. You were missed sorely, but Emma did a great job as always stepping in, and we had a good time, but yeah, welcome back.
Thanks. Had a great time. I hugged some trees that were too big. The trees are a lot larger on the West Coast.
Yes, they are.
But it was great classes, and now I'm glad to be home.
Yeah, so it's the cost of living.
Yes, but no sales tax.
Yeah, no, you're
So
right.
you don't have to do math.
Or police force.
Not entirely true,
I'm just kidding.
but beside the point.
Sorry.
So our Airbnb, there was some sort of police bus next door while I was there, which is why it was funny, because we were all like, we didn't know that Portland had police, but they do, and they're
funny.
working hard. So anyway, new wells.
What are we doing?
This is what the people come for, the
Yeah.
banter.
Yeah.
But I am really excited to get into what we talked about on Sunday, which, continuing in our Generation series, we've moved past Abraham now and talked about Isaac. And there's so much to talk about. We're not going to cover it all, so go back and watch. But one of the things that really hit me was this idea that Isaac, God blessed him so much. What was it, like 100-fold?
100 times over, yeah.
And 100-fold is the biblical language.
Sorry,
the
100x is
fancy-
what I saw in my notes all week, so yeah.
100 times. I was making fun of myself. But anyway, Isaac was blessed a lot. And I feel like sometimes, without even realizing it, we think that that's the ultimate goal. Like, if I wait long enough, if I trust God long enough for the promise, like, then he's going to bless me, and then I can relax and rest in that and enjoy it. But what happened with Isaac was not that.
No, not at all. Matter of fact, we see Isaac move into a season of work the moment the blessing came. That's why I know it's probably not your question, but I did get a couple comments about, well, where does rest fall in? Mm-hmm. Well, that's why it's important to learn how to rest in the middle of the wait, right? You don't have to wait until a season to rest. You can rest now. That's the beauty of a relationship with the Lord, is that we can find rest in him and who he is, and, creating consistent seasons of Sabbath, creating consistent seasons of vacation and things of that nature. But I do think that there's like this mentality. I'm going to work until I get everything I want. And once I get everything I want, I don't have to do the work no more. And just what we see in Isaac's story, and from a lot of people that I've seen, is that God brings the blessing, and yet there's still work on the other side of that.
Yeah, and I don't know why I hadn't thought about that. I'm glad other people asked that question, but it does mean we have to be good at building those rhythms, even on the before side of the blessing.
Absolutely.
So that when we get it, we're still in that, and not, because how often do we think, well, I know I'm supposed to rest, but I'm just going to push through, because if I can get through this season, then on the other side of it, I'll be able to rest. And that is just not what tends to be true in life, or is true in this story.
I mean, you ask the average pop star, the average basketball player, the average real estate agent who
Are
hits
pop
it
stars
big.
average?
Well, I'm just saying, as a whole. And compared to other pops, I guess there is no average. But if you ask anybody who's maybe what we would consider to be super successful or at a pinnacle of their career or their dream pursuit, you'll find that when you get to the top, you're amazed at how much work you'll find there. Because, yes, I want to be this incredible songwriter. And then you write some hits and realize that now you have to do all this other stuff on top of writing songs, because you have that fame that comes along with it, or it's a business, right? So I want a business that succeeds. Well, 100 times blessing to that business means now I got to figure out how to create that more of that product, and find more workers to help develop those products, and figure out shipping and all that stuff. So there's blessing, but there's work on the other side of it.
And you talked about how that that work can also be a burden for our neighbors. And this is where we get into, like, in the story, it was wells. And I don't know if you want to explain a little bit why it was wells, or we can kind of jump over that a little bit. But, like, Isaac was burdening his neighbors because of his blessing, to the point that he couldn't stay there anymore.
Yeah, this is a complicated issue.
Yeah.
right? Like it gets a little complicated because I think, again, what we feel like is, well, the blessing will solve all the natural problems. And yet, we found from Isaac is that the blessing actually kind of created its own challenges on the other side of it, right? And some of those challenges weighed down the people that were directly around Isaac. So for the sake of our conversation, Isaac was tapping into water sources that his neighbors were also tapping into. Well, water in that part of the world, specifically that part of the world, was critical, but it's also a limited supply. That gets to a point where you can drain a water source out.
Yeah, because this isn't like a flowing river.
No, it's like a spring that they tapped into or something of that nature. So now Isaac's neighbors have to come to the mindset of, well, he's just been blessed 100 times over. So that's more crops, more cattle to work the crops, more servants to work the cattle that work the crops. So now it's a stress on the water supply. Isaac now, his blessing adds weight to those directly around them. I would say, again, to the businessman who was 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, and receives an incredible opportunity and steps into the fullness of the blessing and his business turns around, well, the weight of that blessing could affect his family, could affect his friend group, could affect even his engagement in his church culture and community. Oh, where have they been? Well, they've experienced the blessing, and now they have to navigate how to create the structure, because if they're not careful, their blessing will kind of destroy the structure that they currently kind of have.
Yeah, I think that's great. And so what we see Isaac do in this story is he has to go into a new area and dig up new wells that aren't taking from the same resources as his neighbors. And I love this picture, but I do have to confess, and we've even talked about this a little bit, it's still hard for me to sometimes wrap my mind around the metaphor of like, I totally understand why Isaac needed new water sources and new wells, but what does it mean for me in 2022 with city water? Like what is a new well?
Well, we're asking you to sign up for the men's ministry to come out and dig a well with you in the backyard. So our men are ready to go.
Great. I'll talk to the HOA and get back to you guys.
No, the way that, for me, the way that we kind of walk through this Sunday is really, it starts with the source. So what Isaac, his story is teaching is that everything is built around the source of that living water. And then if you fast forward to the New Testament, Jesus speaks about how he's the living water. So if for Isaac, digging wells was the discipline necessary to tap into the source of living water, then for us, digging wells is the discipline necessary to drive ourselves even deeper into a relationship with the living God, who himself defines himself as living water. So in seasons of blessing, there are times where we have to consider that the disciplines need to change. It could be, hey, in order for this next season really to be that all that God wants it, like you're going to have to step into some more education. You may have to balance that checkbook for the first time in 15 years. You may have
What's a checkbook?
There you go. Nobody knows what a checkbook is anymore. That goes to show you how much I balance mine. You may have to step into new relationships. Like that's a tough one, to do the work of discernment that says this relationship may not necessarily survive in the next season, but this relationship will. How do I navigate and move into those spaces? It's the hard work, the discipline of driving even deeper into a committed relationship with the Lord.
Yeah, so even what we were talking about with rest earlier could be digging
Absolutely.
a new well to create that discipline of resting when you need to.
Absolutely.
What do you think, just in your observation as a human being and a pastor, what do you think kind of holds us back from doing that? Or maybe we aren't held back and you have good examples of people who have done that successfully.
No, actually what I've learned is more often than not, so I have a little bit of a different perspective when it comes to the blessing of the Lord. I just believe that God is always pouring out. Like I just feel like he's generous, and everything about him that I read in scriptures that he wants to bless his children. And outside of issues of discipline, when our heart is right with the Lord, I just feel like there's this abundance of overflow, right? Like so pressed down, running together, pressed down, running over, like just these constant imaging of God wanting to bless his people. I do think that the people who figure it out are the people who realize that, oh, God wants to bless, it's my job to create structure. So I think what limits people is they're expecting the blessing before the work of the structure. And I've learned that people who do the work of the structure have a tendency of seeing the blessing of God more. And I
Or
think,
even recognizing
Yeah.
that it is blessing, because if you don't have the structure, you can get crushed under the weight. We just totally mixed metaphors, but
yeah. Well, it's to not throw in a third metaphor, but it's if you and I were to go fishing, and you're like, John, there's this lake that has a ton of fish. And we get there, and you're like, look at all these fish. I'm like, actually, I don't see nothing. It's like, oh, you would see it if we had a net. It's not that the fish aren't there, is I don't have the resource to capture the fish. Now, if we walk to that same, lake and we threw in a net, it would be obvious that we caught the fish. It's obvious. Look at how many fish there are, because we have the structure necessary to reap the harvest. And I'm going to also tell you that a fishing pole is different than a fishing net's different than a fishing boat, right? So I do feel like for those who I've just seen the blessing of the Lord kind of their hand on their lives are people who've recognized, there's work involved in this, that I have to be. Now, again, it's not that we're working for salvation. So let's just get that off the table and make sure we're really clear about that. Jesus said, come to me, all who are thirsty, and you can drink. So absolutely. But when it does come to the blessings of life, there are times where God's saying, well, your structure can't hold what you're asking for. Do the work of structure. And I think it's that principle, and I'm hoping that that principle opens people up a little bit more, because I think people do kind of sit back like me and you would just sit at the lake, and you're saying, no, just wait for it. You'll see. I promise. Watch. There's so much fish in this water.
one of them will jump eventually.
You'll see it. Eventually, you'll see it. I promise. We're just going to
Pray
stay
more.
here. Yeah. So I do feel like that concept of digging wells that we see with Isaac is very, very tangible to us today. Like, what are those disciplines in your life that you need to set up in order to receive and maintain and steward properly the blessings that the Lord brings?
Yeah, and I think to go back to the digging wells, it's really helpful, because I can almost get overwhelmed in a conversation like this and think of 6 or 7 things that I need to suddenly start implementing or changing. But we see Isaac digs one well at a time.
It's progression.
And so I would just encourage anyone who's watching this and maybe feeling that way, pray and ask God to show what that one thing is, or maybe you already know in your gut what the one thing is to start with, and just take the next step towards that structure, and don't try to flip everything upside down and build 6 wells in a week.
No, I think it's wisdom. And one of the things you just said that I've heard more often than not is 90% of the conversations I've had about discipline, they know. Like, you know if it's that bad relationship or that habit that you keep going back to, or that insecurity that's kind of deep down and festering, that healing work that needs to be done. But for those who don't know, that's where we tune our ear to the Spirit of God to say, what do I need to change? What do you need to show me in order for this to shift? And again, I want to make sure I'm really clear. I'm not telling you that if you do A, B, C, and D, God's going to do E, F, and G. I feel like sometimes that formula kind of creates a genie in the bottle perspective of God.
Yeah, or a vending machine.
Or a vending machine. But what I've just learned about the Lord, and we actually see it in other Old Testament stories, that when God starts blessing, if you're there on the other side of that with structure, the blessing continues, right? We can talk about the widow with the jars, right? That God was just filling it with oil and oil. What if she stopped at 2 jars?
Yeah.
I would introduce at CMN to this incredible story in the Old Testament that I've read, and it just reintroduced to me this idea of digging ditches, and how the army was told, dig ditches, and God would fill them with water, but they didn't come from the heavens, it filled up. And then just this picture of what happened if they just stopped with 2 ditches, right? Like they just had to keep on digging ditches in order so that they could capture the fullness of the blessing of God. And that's really what I hope people caught out of Sunday.
Yeah, and then to build on what you have been teaching throughout this Generation series, is the purpose of all of this isn't so that we get the blessing and we just keep it. It's all about digging the wells, building the structure to receive that, to bless those who are around us, rather than being those burdens who are taking from their resources.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I'm really excited, because kind of along this line, but also shifting gears a little bit, you made a big announcement on Sunday.
Yeah, a little bit.
Do you want to share a little of what's going on here?
Yeah, well, for those of you who've been with us for the last, 2.5 years now, you know that when Jess and I came, Center City moved underneath the umbrella of the Multiply family along with our coming. So Jess and I took the role as lead pastors, and Center City moved into this partnership with the Multiply family of churches, and it's been a great 2.5 years. It really has.
I mean, who knew what was coming?
Absolutely nobody knew, and we were able to come in with some changes of structure that really prepared us for what eventually would be the pandemic, one of the darkest seasons in our recent history. And as a church, like, we had to shut our doors for 4 months, and we were trying to figure out how that would affect everything. And you guys just banded together, jumped into groups. We were doing Zoom, everything. Sunday morning was an online experience, and it was a challenging season, but it was a season full of, like, seeing the provision of God, and being able really to lean on the blessing of a foundation and a covering that is the Multiply family of churches. Well, as we prayerfully believing that this is us stepping out of this season, through a series of really challenging but good conversations between Pastor Doug, the lead pastor of the Multiply family, and I, it just became obvious the hand of the Lord was kind of guiding us in two different ways. And both of us kind of looked across at each other. Nothing was wrong. There wasn't anything negative. There wasn't even really tension. We just thought that maybe what God was saying is it's time to consider what it looks like for Center City to return to kind of this place of being what we call recognized as a general council church, basically autonomous, for lack of a better word, where we would become a sovereign church once again, and started prayerfully considering what that means, and did the diligent work of prayer, did the diligent work of wise counsel. When it was time, we brought the team in and talked to them. When it was time, we brought the elders in and talked to them. They prayed with us, and everybody just saw the hand of God moving us in this direction. So what we announced Sunday is, for the next 6 months, we're going to take the time that's necessary to move from underneath the Multiply covering and become a General Assemblies affiliated church with the Assemblies of God. We're still AG, but we'll be connected as a independent church. We're excited about that.
Yeah, and talk about work on the other side of a blessing.
Absolutely.
You are doing a lot of learning and researching and decision making right now.
Yes.
I will say,
Constitutions and reading and blogs and phone calls. It's been a lot of work. Yeah.
So as the associate pastor, I will say, please be praying for our pastor right now, because it's a lot to carry and walk through, but it's exciting.
It is. And the work of weight is made lighter when there's passion in your heart and people on your side. And I have just felt an overwhelming outpouring, first from this team. Your pastoral team is absolutely incredible.
Yeah, we got a good team.
And they all have not just risen to the occasion, but have stepped into, like, almost new mantles for this next season. And it's been a blessing to Jess and I to be connected arm to arm with each and every one of them. They've been amazing. Your elders team, which we don't talk a lot about, we will be talking a little bit more about here in the near future, but they've been incredible, praying for us, giving us wise counsel, me more than anybody being able to call them and lean on their wisdom. They've also been really good helping people in the church kind of understand some of this transition, both those teams. And it's been a blessing, but really, again, the passion behind it. We're just really believing that this is what God will use. As we build this well, this is what God will use to continue the increase. Because we're seeing blessing already. We're being blessed financially as a church. We're doing better than we've done in 2.5 years. This has just been a phenomenal season of giving.
We just saw 3 people baptized.
3 people baptized. We're seeing new people in our church almost every week. So God is doing some incredible things, and we just feel like this is one of those.
Yeah, so one thing that just might be on people's minds, because you hear about this, and if you're like me, you don't fully understand what it means. So the bottom line is this going to change what it looks like to be part of a small group, show up on a Sunday morning? What does this mean for that?
Honestly, the verbiage might change a little bit, but the heart of this community will stay the same. That's the beauty of what we have done for the last 2.5 years with the Multiply family, is that, yes, they provided some foundational covering, but really they've allowed us to work in a very artisanal way when it comes to church. So the community has been built the way that we feel like God has asked us to build the community. So yes, Sundays won't change much at all. Groups, it's all still the same. There'll be some switches in language, but ultimately, we just believe that God's already created the format.
Switches in language means the words we use. Someone did hear me say that and think that we might be trying out a new language on Sunday mornings, like Spanish.
You're gonna need a new lead pastor.
So I'm just gonna clarify.
Yeah. No.
Switches in language means the verbiage in English.
There you go. Some of the terms that we use here on Sunday morning.
I don't know. I'm getting pretty good at biblical Greek.
There you go. There you go. But we've had questions even about partnership, and we'll be able to answer a lot of those a little bit more in the future with a lot more clarity, and that's the work that I'm currently doing now. That's the well that I'm currently digging. Remember, I did say that we're going to take the next 6 months to really grab a hold of this as a whole, and if it takes less time than that, amen. If it takes more time than that, amen. We just want to do our due diligence and making sure that it's healthy across the board, and I'm actually really excited about it.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Also, Jon has graciously offered to accept all questions.
Absolutely. And we'll drop our email somewhere down here at this part of the podcast, because really our team is shouldering a lot of the weight of the change, but a lot of the answers that you're looking for, they're not going to have. It's stuff that I'm either going to have or tell you honestly that I don't have yet, but it's something that I'm looking forward to. I've already fielded a couple of those emails. They've all been positive, man. I love a church family that's just like, let's do this and getting behind everything that God is doing and saying. A couple of you have even volunteered your time and energy, so thank you for that. We don't know what we don't know yet, but as soon as we know, we'll let you know. But if you have any questions, the email is just simply Jon@centercity.church, and we would love to help you answer some of these questions during this transition.
Yeah, so like I said before, kind of jokingly, but totally seriously, please be praying. That is the biggest work that you can do right now. Pray for Jon, pray for the team. There's a lot of choices to be made. And then celebrate with us. Pray about what God's going to do as we step into this new season. And then show up on Sunday morning. We'll be right back here, 10 a.m. Sunday. If you are new to the Center City family, so you've just started coming around in the last few months, we would love to meet you on Sunday. We're doing a pizza lunch with the team. It's going to be right in the building after church. No need to RSVP. Bring the kids. We just want a chance to answer some of your questions, get to know you. We're really excited, as you can see, about everything that's going on. And we would love to see all of you Sunday morning at 10 a.m.
Can't wait.